Once you know how much carb, fluid and sodium you should be aiming to consume on race day, the next step is to make a plan for how you're going to hit those numbers. Will you use gels, chews, bars, drink mixes, or a combination of them all? And how much carb is in each of those products? Again, it's really important to know your numbers and how your chosen energy products will help you hit them. For example, if one gel contains 30 grams of carbohydrate, you're going to need 3 to hit 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour.
If we go back 10 years ago, even the elite athletes weren't talking about their numbers, at least not openly as they are today. It was, oh, maybe I'll take this many gels during the entire race, or I'll try to catch this many aid stations along the way and drink water. It wasn't about the specific amount, whereas now it really is about how many grams of carbs per hour. And for most athletes, that is going to be in the form of gels, but also drinks. Elites obviously have bottles, but I think many more folks are carrying their own today. And it's just much more talked about today than it was 10, 12 years ago amongst elite athletes all the way on down.
Faster marathon runners who'll be out on the course for 2 and a bit hours tend to use energy drink mixes and gels to hit their numbers.
So every 5K I get a bottle. One of the advantages of being in the elite side is you get a table with your bottles on. So I take on about 22 grams in each bottle, and then every 10K I take a gel, so I take 3 gels.
Yeah, it's pretty much all through gels. So I have like a 30-gram gel from Precision Fuel and Hydration. Those are just really convenient because, again, we get bottles about every 5K, and like 30 grams allows me to maximize every fueling station. So yeah, and then I find the gels are a little bit easier because like a lot of times your stomach can maybe start to hurt later in the race, and if you have to drink like 8 to 10 ounces to get all those carbs in, it's like that might not happen. But if I can just sip on half an ounce of a gel, I'm gonna get like 15 grams.
Combined carb and electrolyte drink mixes are very useful for quicker runners as they deliver a steady stream of rapidly digestible energy whilst also contributing towards their fluid and sodium numbers. But it's important to find a strategy that is going to work for you. For runners who'll be out on course for 2.5 hours and more, which is the point at which your glycogen stores really become depleted and your sweat losses begin to mount up, we generally recommend pulling your carbohydrate lever separately from fluid and sodium. What this means in practice is that you'll ideally get your carbs from more solid sources like gels and chews, whilst relying on bottles and cups for your sodium and fluid intake. Decoupling your strategy in this way basically means your carb intake isn't impacted by how much you need to drink or vice versa. So why does this matter? Well, if you're relying on bottles for carb, fluids and sodium, your carb intake is directly tied to how much you drink. So in cold conditions, your sweat rate will be low and your fluid intake will probably also decrease. By naturally wanting and needing to drink less, you can risk underfueling because your carb intake becomes too low. In contrast, when it's hot and your sweat rate is higher, your fluid intake will increase. Again, if you're relying on bottles to hit carb, fluid and sodium numbers, you can risk overdoing the carbs and suffering from GI issues because you're drinking more to keep up with sweat losses. Once you've decided which products you're going to use to hit your numbers, will you be self-sufficient and carry what you need, or rely on aid stations? Mario knows what he prefers.
I think it's really important to be self-sufficient on race day. So you know exactly what you have on you, what you're going to take, and at what frequency, so there's no guesswork involved. I also think it's equally important to do some homework beforehand and see what is going to be offered along the course, so that if you drop a gel, if you pack poorly the morning of, you have an idea of like, oh, there are 3 aid stations along the course where I could pick up an additional gel if necessary. It's important to know that information. But I think you should be entirely self-sufficient on race day. That way you're not surprised by anything. You know that you have what you need because this is a plan that you've put into practice well ahead of race day. You've rehearsed it numerous times, and here you're just replicating what it is that you've done, ideally a dozen times or so before the race itself.
If you do opt to be self-sufficient, it's worth taking some time to consider how you're going to carry what you need.
I started with like gel in my hand and then 2 gels just stuffed down my top. And then I was able to pick up every table. I had the gel literally sellotaped onto the bottle, and was just each one picking it up and then deciding what I wanted in that moment. And I kept the gels on me just as a backup in case I missed a table or if one of the drinks was missing, because I didn't want to be left sort of freaking out mid-race that I needed a gel and there wasn't anything there available.
There is a lot of great apparel out now that you can get your hands on that are full of pockets, and you can literally just stuff your pockets full of gels, tabs, whatever it is that you're going to need during the race itself. There are also belts that you can put on that aren't very invasive but just have a lot of storage capacity to them. So it's easier than ever, I think, from the standpoint of apparel and things that are available to you to actually carry this stuff on your person versus 10 years ago, 15 years ago, where shorts didn't have a lot of pockets. These belts weren't available, and if they were pretty cumbersome and they weren't comfortable. But now the apparel is so good, some of the accessories are so good, I would advise you to just look into those options because it makes carrying this stuff a lot easier than it's ever been. Everything leading up to race day is the rehearsal, and I think you really have to think of it in that way. When you're doing your key long run sessions, even some of your key tempo runs that aren't really that long, but you're running at or maybe even a little quicker than race intensity, those are good opportunities to practice your fueling and hydration strategies, not just from the standpoint of what is it that I'm taking down and how often, but also how am I going to get access to those things. You can practice, carrying all of those gels on you or running with a handheld bottle. Things that you can also do are just run loops. So maybe if you're planning to take hydration every 20 minutes or so, you've got a 2 or 3 mile loop that you're just repeating, and you've got a bottle out and you can go and pick that up every time that you run by every 10 or 20 minutes, because that actually takes practice. It can be really hard to grab a cup from a volunteer, but if you set them out on tables, that is something that you can also work into those rehearsal sessions before you get to race day.
And everyone always says you don't want to change things on race day, but there's no way I would want to be taking on a different product to what I was used to. You've already got enough things to worry about on race day, so I think the fact that you can control for that stress, I would definitely want to be kind of sure that I was happy with the product and tested it well.